Welcome to Mass Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. Let me start with some macro thoughts. Obviously, the Juncker did a Brezhnev and kissed Trump, and Trump tweeted about it, saying that obviously the EU and the US love each other. The US-EU trade truce is good news, according to Holger, for world economy. Yet it is still far too early to write off the risk from a generalized trade war. So the market took some comfort from that kiss and make-up session, and we'll touch on that in a minute. It's been 2 years, and China's $24 billion promise to the Philippine President Duterte has not materialized. Howard French, in rather droll response, shock and awe of headline numbers indeed. Home thoughts: with a lick of paint and some tasteful restoration work, Massawa could give Zanzibar a run for its money, says Tom Gardner. And indeed, his photographs were quite extraordinary. Let me share one with you. Words of the day, and this is referencing the heat wave that we're seeing in Europe. Urban heat island, an area of town or city that is significantly hotter than its surroundings due to heat generation by human activity and the absorption of sunlight by roads, buildings, etc. The skyscraper canyon, the scorching street. And that's from Rob McFarlane. I follow. There's an underground lake on Mars. This is a photograph from Bloomberg. That took me back to Don DeLillo. The specialist is monitoring data on his mission console when a voice breaks in, a voice that carried with it a strange and unspecifiable poignancy. Radar data collected by ESA's Mars Express mission point to a pond of liquid water buried under layers of ice and dust in the south polar region of Mars. And I imagine a voice coming out of that lake. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pigeon, is a melange of repartee, laughter, and song with the quality of purest, sweetest sadness. And this is from the New Scientist. Massive lake of water found beneath Mars' south pole could host life. And that took me back to David Bowie. And he obviously was a prophet, seer, musician. Life on Mars, I'm referring to. Who is America? 2018 First Look. Sacha Baron Cohen. He's a hilarious individual. I found him immensely funny. You've got to watch this. It's just extraordinary. On the road, Magnum Photos, America's open roads, have inspired countless artists and writers. The expansive landscapes, the empty highways, roadside attractions, pit stops, the passing ghost towns, as significant, if not more so, than the eventual destination. Depicted in legendary texts from the likes of Jack Kerouac, Tom Wolfe, and Hunter S. Thompson, the American road trip in popular culture offers up a chance to understand the alluring freedom of the open road. This summer on Magnum Photos, we explore the American road trips made by Magnum photographers in order to understand why the idea of road tripping across America has captured the imagination of so many. Of course, one of my favorite books is Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And I like these two photographs. The Inge Morath Foundation next to a road in Arkansas is a religious farmer used the trunk of a tree to pin up his announcement for passing sinners. That's by Inge Morath. And then I like this one also, which I've liked from way back, La Jolla, California, 1968, Dennis Stock. And it's a really great photograph as well. Political reflections. He wants to keep people's stomachs full of food and their hearts full of fear. That's Kim Jong-un's survival strategy as per the Korea Club. What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening, President Trump. And this is quite extraordinary, isn't it? He's tilted pitch in his favor by this constant barrage around fake news. And then I thought to myself yesterday, if you are a reality TV star, the reality is your reality in many ways. President Trump, as I said earlier this month, has now turned his attention to Xi Jinping and thrown him the keys, challenging him to a chicky run. And at the BRICS summit in Johannesburg, President Xi warned protectionism is dealing a severe blow to global trade. 9th of July, I asked tariff wars, who blinks first? Will it be Xi Jinping or will it be Donald Trump? Xi calls for a rejection of trade wars because they have no winner. Very interesting article in the Financial Times that Redcap Man alerted me to. The Chinese are wary of Donald Trump's creative destruction. Of course, that's referencing one of the greatest economists, Schumpeter. Donald Trump is leading a double life in the West. Most foreign policy experts see him as reckless, unpredictable, and self-defeating. But though many in Asia dislike him as much as the Europeans do, they see him as a more substantial figure. I've just spent a week in Beijing talking to officials and intellectuals, many of whom are awed by his skill as a strategist and tactician. He worries this is a Chinese gentleman, former Vice Foreign Minister He Yafei. He worries that strategic competition has become the new normal and says that trade wars are just the tip of the iceberg. In Chinese eyes, Mr. Trump's response is a form of creative destruction. He is systematically destroying the existing institutions, from the WTO to NATO to NAFTA, and the Iran nuclear deal as a first step towards renegotiating the world order on terms more favorable to Washington. Once the order is destroyed, the Chinese elite believes Mr. Trump will move to stage 2, renegotiating America's relationship with other powers. My interlocutors say Mr. Trump is the US's first president for more than 40 years to bash China on 3 fronts simultaneously: trade, military, and ideology. They describe him as a master tactician, focusing on one issue at a time, extracting as many concessions as he can. They speak of the skillful way Trump has treated President Xi Jinping. Look at how he handled North Korea, one says. He got Xi Jinping to agree to UN sanctions 6 times, creating an economic stranglehold on the country. China almost turned North Korea into a sworn enemy of the country, but they also see him as a strategist, willing to declare a truce in each area where there are no more concessions to be had, and then start again with a new front. For the Chinese, even Mr. Trump's sycophantic press conference with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, in Helsinki, had a strategic purpose. They see it as Henry Kissinger in reverse. In 1972, the US nudged China off the Soviet axis in order to put pressure on its real rival, the Soviet Union. Today, Mr. Trump is reaching out to Russia in order to isolate China. I agree with that. I spoke about that severally in 2013, 2014, when I couldn't understand why the US was being so aggressive when it came to Russia. Many Chinese experts are quietly calling for a rethink of the longer-term strategy. They want to prepare the ground for a new grand bargain with the US based on Chinese retrenchment. Many feel that Mr. Xi has overreached and worry that it was a mistake simultaneously to antagonize the US economically and militarily in the South China Sea. So which is the real Mr. Trump? The reckless reactionary destroying critical alliances, or the stable genius who is pressuring China? The answer seems to depend on where you ask the question. Things look different from Beijing than from Brussels. And as I said, the triangulation of China is something I was thinking the US would pursue a number of years back. I couldn't understand why they were seeking to sort of freeze and push Putin into Xi Jinping's arms. Workers making Trump 2020 campaign flags in Fuyang. This is how the world works. This is how the world works. Britain is stockpiling food, drugs, and blood so they don't run out after Brexit. Russia, interesting piece by Badra Kumar, swats away Israeli bluster on Syria. The Russian version of the visit by the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Chief of Staff General Valery Gerasimov to West Jerusalem on July 23rd became available finally on Wednesday in the nature of a terse TASS report, quoting a military diplomatic source in Moscow as saying that the visiting Russian officials looked into the tasks of completing the anti-terrorist operation in Syria's south. An unnamed Israeli official had earlier floated a story that Netanyahu did some tough talking with Lavrov and rebuffed a Russian offer to create a 100-kilometer buffer zone adjacent to the Golan Heights. The first indication that talks didn't go well came when Israel shot down a Syrian jet on July 24 in Quneitra, bordering the Golan. It was a calculated act of belligerence by Israel. The TASS report today punctures the Israeli version that the two Russian officials were deputed by President Putin specially to discuss with Netanyahu the future of Iranian presence in Syria. Now transpires that the Russian officials were on a tour of Israel, Germany and France. The Israeli bravado can only be seen as a desperate ploy to cover up its humiliating defeat in Syria, with the terrorist groups that were its proxies surrendering lock, stock and barrel in Daraa and Quneitra to the Syrian-Russian forces, especially the hasty exfiltration of the controversial group known as the White Helmets to Jordan via the Golan Heights, and with logistical help from the Israeli military. Damascus is now turning attention to the liberation of the northwestern province of Idlib. It will be a major confrontation due to the presence of a large number of foreign terrorists in northwestern Syria. The Iranian media reported that a Russian flagship Ro-Ro Sparta was spotted crossing the Bosphorus en route to Syria's Tartus, carrying military cargo, mostly ammunition, shells and missiles, and that the reinforcements are meant for the Syrian army's upcoming assault on Idlib province. It is an extraordinary about-turn as to how President Assad fended off the regime changes. Facebook share price plunged, wiped out the equivalent of an entire Nike or McDonald's from the company's market cap yesterday. Market cap lost by Facebook is equivalent to the market cap of Bitcoin, that's zero hedge. Have a look at Facebook's timeline. Here's how Facebook's 151 billion route could rewrite the history books. That's from business. Now, I was bearish about Facebook a while back, and of course it rallied monstrously to a brand new all-time high. We're now back to the price where I was recommending selling it. So I stand chastised for calling that way too early, but I still think we're now going to see this roll over a little bit. Tesla, we have an inverted front end of a CDS curve with a $50 billion equity market cap. Never seen something like this as convert bond. Let's move on now to the currency markets. Euro dollar 117.27, dollar index 94.14, Japanese yen 110.69, Swiss franc 0.9915, the pound 131.98. The Australian dollar 0.7436, India rupee 68.655, that's very much inversely correlated to oil. South Korean won 11.1958, that's bounced a little. The Rial 368.79, that's bounced. Egyptian pound 17.8873, and the Rand has rallied as well, 13.1276. Goldman Sachs is calling the bottom for emerging markets in point of fact, so you've seen a nice rally in the currencies as well. This is a dollar index chart from T Commodity. As I said, we're now at 94.14 and testing the lower bounds of the range. We were testing the higher bounds not too long ago. Euro dollar, my target is 118.10 and maybe even higher before we fall back and hit new lows. Commodity markets, Turkey vows to keep buying Iranian oil. We will not obey, said Erdogan. This is a chart of WTI crude oil from Chi Girl. We're now at $69 a barrel. We've moved higher off the back of the jaw between Iran and Trump. Then moving on, potential bear flag forming on Brent, says T Commodity. Might be a little bit early with that. Gold, last trading around the 1230 level, bounced nicely off the lows that we saw not too long ago. Emerging markets, Goldman Sachs reckons the emerging market sell-off could be over. That's from Paul Wallace. 14th of May, I called it a crisis when I said this has all the ingredients for baking a good old-fashioned crisis. David Inglis today, we're looking at the strongest correlation between the Chinese currency and emerging market currencies on record. Venezuela is delaying its new currency rollout by 2 weeks when it plans to slash more zeros off the bolivar. As I've said before, I said it last year, Nicolas Maduro's Venezuela is a breaking point. The edge, there is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who've gone over. Let's move on to Africa. This is Zapiro interpreting the BRICS conference via the Daily Maverick. Powerful, I thought, matters financial and geopolitical. We won't tolerate anarchy, said the president in Zimbabwe. I, of course, expect a youthquake to break in favor of Nelson Chamisa, as I've said for the last few days. A youthquake is defined as a significant cultural, political, or social change arising from the actions or influence of young people. Bemba, who was last in the ICC's prison and is now returning to the Congo, cited his experience, management of men, management of security, of the army, and also of economic development as being his calling card. It is not an obsession. It is so that we, the opposition, can win, and everything so that a candidate from the opposition can win by presenting a program that is credible for the population. I hope he does. The key figures expected to run for president in the DR Congo, of course, Kabila hasn't come out clearly. He said last week, I know why there is some tension in the room, he told the packed chambers of parliament in the capital, Kinshasa, on July 20th. It's because there are those who think that today I would say, ladies and gentlemen, understand my emotion. I will not say understand my emotion, but rather understand my passion for Congo. 28 years ago, Mobutu, in power since 1965, tearfully uttered the first phrase as they announced the end of one-party rule and plans to usher in democracy. Any attempts by Kabila to extend his 17-year rule would outrage his opponents indeed. So he's got Felix Tshisekedi, he's got Moise Katumbi, who can't get in the country, Jean-Pierre Bemba is on his way back, and Vital Kamerhe. If you're interested in the biographies of those fellows, please have a look at Rich Wrap-Ups. I think Kabila still owns the landscape. Garama too tweeted in response to me the astounding alacrity with which the new president of Angola flushed down the toilet a presumed deal not to go after the erstwhile robbers of Angola's public resources. And the family of Dos Santos could be the reason Kabila seems intent to stay in power or die trying. And Garama too calls him a trapped rat. South Sudan rivals sign a power-sharing deal that seeks to end war. Good luck with that. I think both of them are essentially disqualified from ever reaching a power-sharing deal. South Sudan officially ended negotiations with Total, and that's the end of a 30-plus year saga. This was 1 week after Juba summoned the French ambassador over these remarks. He said those responsible of that barbary can be and must be caught, judged, and punished. Eyeing Trump, China, South Africa calls for trade cooperation at the BRICS summit. Indeed, that was to be expected. Trade and investment cooperation is the propeller for overarching BRICS cooperation. We need to make our cooperation more pragmatic and institutionalized. South African all shares down 5.24% this year. Dollar versus rand. The rand is at the top of its recent range, 13.1276. On the General Juncker-led bounce. Aliko Dangote has said that Standard Chartered is arranging funds for his refinery. Lenders would commit about $3.15 billion, with the World Bank's IFC providing $150 million. We will end up spending between 12 to 14 billion, he said. Nigerian all shares down 4.96% this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 10.93% this year. We've got a rate meeting here in Kenya, and I said to the nation, I expect rates to be held in check. The rate cap has interfered with monetary policy transmission, and its repeal or substantive modification is, I believe, required as a sine qua non for normalized monetary policy operation. Tallow oil, suspended oil trucking in Kenya. This is being reported by CTNSIS, and we've spoken about that before. Kenya's oldest mortgage lender wants to offload every single loan on its books. This is housing finance. I did an interview with Stephen Jennings of Tartu City, and his partners, now adversaries, Vimal and Nahashon, strike back, according to Wazua. Have a look at the Business Daily article where they're being accused of tax evasion. Nairobi all shares up 1.19% this year. Nairobi NSE20 is down 10.73% this year. Data from Airbnb shows that there were 39,500 guests hosted in Kenyan properties in the year to September, a 143% jump from a similar period last year. With that, I shall take my leave. Thank you.